How do people perceive downtown Detroit? A look at how Michigan's economy is ranked and the economic divide in bordering school districts. Stay put. MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi, and welcome to MiWeek. Thanks for joining us. I'm Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press, holding down the fort while Christy McDonald is on vacation. We've got a lot to get to tonight. We'll talk about where Michigan's economy is ranked compared to other states, and we're going to look at an eye-opening report about the economic disparities in Michigan school districts that border on each other. But first, a survey by the Downtown Detroit Partnership shows that 91% of Metro Detroiters have a positive impression of downtown. Here are some of the highlights from the survey of nearly 4,000 people. The majority feel that downtown Detroit has a lot of potential. 92% say it's a good place to take out-of-town guests, and 88% say they visited downtown in the past year. But there were some less favorable impressions as well. Only 69% feel downtown is safe at night. Less than 40% feel the Central Business District is welcoming to the LGBT community, and a meager 15% feel city buses are convenient options for getting to and around downtown. Here to talk about the survey is the CEO of the Downtown Detroit Partnership, Eric Larson, and of course we have regular MiWeek contributor Nolan Finley, editorial page editor of the Detroit News. Guys, welcome to MiWeek.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, so
great to be with you.
Big difference in those numbers. Really high on one end, really low on the others, and I guess you wouldn't necessarily be surprised about the areas that we have challenges with.
No, I don't think it does come as a surprise, but I think first and foremost, this is a survey that we started 2 years ago. So this is the second of an annual survey that we intend to do, every year. It's been supported by Hudson Weber. Hudson Weber has taken a very strong interest in how are we moving the city forward and making sure that there are, we're addressing not only the highlights but also some of the challenges. And so with that support, we really are using this as a data set to inform and educate what is working and what isn't, working as well as we want it to be. And so while we've created an environment in really a very short period of time, I mean, the three of us have been living downtown Detroit for a long time, and this is a very unique moment. And so there are a number of things like the activities and the visitors, the increased visitors and the increased work population in daytime, during the daytime. But there are still some challenges around things like safety, around things about how do we access the city, how do we make sure that the city is really inclusive to everyone. And so we're working on that, and that's a big part of the Downtown Detroit Partnership's mission, is to really address
How much of the negative do you feel like is perception versus reality? And I'm thinking there specifically about safety. I mean, downtown is actually a pretty safe place, and relatively speaking, it's a lot safer than some other areas of the city.
Oh, I mean, great point, and I think there is a big part of this that is perception, but the problem is 99% of reality of perception. So we got to address the perception, and the facts are, especially during the daytime, the downtown is incredibly safe. We have no crimes of violence in the downtown. What we do have is a lot of crimes of opportunity, and that gets to being around educating those. We've had a lot more traffic, a lot more people that are coming to the city that haven't been in the city before. And so where do you park where it's safe? Trying to get people to go to lots that are attended and well lit.
But do we need larger police presence in the downtown footprint?
The city has, again, we've all been living it over the last 40 or 50 years, really gone from a very robust economy to and set of resources to something that really has been much more challenged and demanded. And yes, the city resources in general, especially the policing resources, are stretched. I mean, they're stretched across the entire geography of the city, and we do have less officers downtown. That said, we've never had a better partnership with the Detroit Police Department. We've never had better leadership, quite frankly. I mean, it starts with James Craig and goes all the way through. But so they are working with us to try and figure out creative ways to take what is ultimately less bodies and deploy them more effectively. We're working with them on after-hour assignments and engagements with the police force, so that we can actually have sworn officers on the streets, but after hours in a extra income capacity. So there are things that we are working, but yes, we have less people on the street.
So, Eric, you mentioned that this turnaround in perception has come fairly quickly over the last 5 or 6 years. We all remember, sitting around having discussions about Detroit's bad image and how do you improve Detroit's bad image. And, I felt all along you're not going to change the image without changing the reality, and the reality downtown has changed fairly rapidly.
Oh, it's changed incredibly rapidly. I mean, I would never have guessed, even 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, I would never have guessed that the downtown would change as rapidly as it has. I mean, Sue Mosey in Midtown has been working at this for 25 years, and she's been doing it brick by brick. But downtown has transformed literally in chunks. I mean, and a lot of that has been driven by, our two billionaires, the Ilitch family, and Dan Gilbert, and what they have done in a very short period of time has not only activated the city and repositioned the city and changed the perception, but it also has filled in the city, because a big part of the safety, and the perception of safety, is where you have these these areas of inactivity, and we now are filling that in. I mean, there's nothing like. I've said for a long time, I think one of the most important projects to happen in the downtown is this new Red Wing Arena, because its footprint itself was an infill project that allowed us to bridge and link the Midtown and downtown in an area that desperately needed that. And so there are things like that that I think are very important.
Yeah. What do you imagine is behind the low number related to LGBT sort of welcoming environment in downtown? Do you think that's something specific, or is it more general?
I think, Stephen, I think it really gets to the fact that the core downtown has been much more a business environment, and for a long time, corporate America didn't necessarily embrace a lot of those kinds of activities. Sure. I think that has changed significantly, and it will continue to change. But the reality is, for a long time, it was sort of the financial district. It was, where people came in the corporate, community and in the public sector, but to work. It now has become much more about the, 24/7, a much more diverse set of activities, and that ultimately will build on a more inclusive environment. But I do think that, in general, our community needs to continue to embrace, all walks of life, all forms of need, and all forms of opinion. And I think we're moving in the right direction.
And I would imagine that some of that change will take place as we get more and more housing downtown too, and it takes on a really different kind of feel. It's not just about business, people live there.
That's right. I mean, the residential population will make, and quite frankly, the retail offerings that are starting to really materialize, will make a very big difference. I also think that as we improve the transit options, those kinds of things allow for additional access. The fact that, you both know the facts better than I, but I think 40% of the Detroit population doesn't have access to a personal vehicle. Yeah. That's important.
Well, beyond that, parking's such a challenge now downtown. If people felt comfortable getting on a bus and were able to get on a bus and come downtown, I think it's not just, folks who have to ride a bus, but I think there'll be a lot of people who say, wow, I can get on this thing, and then I don't have to park, I don't have to worry about Ubering home or whatever. I think it would really help downtown if we could get our bus system right.
Yeah, I think that's right, Nolan. And it's interesting, one of the things that the partnership, the DDP, is focused on is long-range planning. And so 6 years ago, we did this transit-oriented development plan that was the precursor to M1. and really thinking about how do we take that main street and convert it into something that is alternate, has an alternative mobility component to it. We also are working on a significant installation of bike lanes throughout the downtown that ultimately connect to the greenway initiatives and so forth that are taking place. And those need to be done in a way that they're protected and actually really accessible. I mean, one of the things that came out of the survey is that a very low percentage, 35% of the people polled, believed that there was safe and viable biking options in the downtown. Those kinds of things are the things that we need to continue to work on. And so, as M1 comes online, that's going to change the way we park.
And I mean, that is sort of essential. I mean, downtown has always been sort of a series of clusters. You've had New Center, Midtown, Central Business District, Corktown, and they're really not, I mean, you really have to get in your car to go from place to place. Already you're seeing along the M line development. It's not open yet, but you're seeing new apartments, new offices going up all along the route and 2 or 3 blocks over. How important is that line going to be to knitting together these various clumps of downtown?
Yeah, I think M1 and the Q line now, as it's been named, is really extremely important. It's important, again, we get to talk about the perception. We started this conversation around perception, so it changes the perception about who we are as a community and how we're embracing other forms of mobility. But it also changes the mechanics of how we operate as a society in the downtown, as a community in the downtown. So we will see that change. I mean, already people are thinking about strategic locations for parking employees that are much further up north on the line that then can come into the city and allow for access, additional access for those that are visiting. So I think as we get into this, and the city is ramping up on its planning department, I mean, what Maurice Cox and the group that he's putting together is very, very important at this moment. So I think we'll get there.
All right. Eric Larson, CEO of the Downtown Detroit Partnership. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Nolan.
Thanks, Eric.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. All right, turning now to Michigan's economy. Governing Magazine ranked the overall economic performance of all 50 states, and Michigan is pretty much in the middle at number 23. But the interesting finding was that a state's ranking coincided with the approval rating of its governor. A stronger economy resulted in a stronger approval rating for the governor, while the governors of the bottom states had weaker approval ratings. Nolan, what do we make of this with Rick Snyder, who I think is sort of an anomalous example among governors because he's got these other problems that I think have more to do with his approval rating than
Flynn, et cetera. But he's always struggled with matching his performance rating and approval rating to the performance of the state. If you look where we were 6 years ago in these rankings, we were at or near the bottom. We were almost dead last. Moving back into the middle of the pack has taken just a Herculean effort on the part of everybody in the state, but the governor and some of the policies put in this place have to get credit for it. The Fraser Institute from Canada last week put out a report urging Ontario to mimic Michigan and the policies it's put in place under Governor Snyder, the policies to stimulate growth and job creation in the state. And yet, I mean, you look even before Flynn, he won his re-election just
pretty narrowly,
4 points at a time when the state was in the midst of a major comeback, which is really unusual.
Yeah, well, I think part of the problem is it's the connection between these things, right? So there's no question that if you cut taxes, you grow the economy, things get better in certain ways. But if you continue the sort of disinvestment that we've had in Michigan in government and government services, you create all kinds of other problems. I mean, there's a study out today from the University of Michigan that looks at what cities are looking forward to in the next year in terms of finances, and it's getting worse again, not better. So even as the economy is growing, cities and governments are not experiencing that growth, and that means the services that people count on are either tattered or disappearing.
But it's not as simple as that. I mean, what Snyder has done, and I don't think it's fair to say he's disinvested, because he has diverted a ton of money to solving the long-term obligations of these local communities, paying down the pension debt, which was a time bomb ready to go off. And if the state stays on the pace he's put them, by 2035, these pension plans will be solvent again. And nobody, when he took office, nobody was looking at a time when they would be solvent. And that's the biggest. It is, because it's not immediate gratification. But that's how Michigan got into this situation. That's how its communities got into this situation. Let's make everybody happy today, and mortgage it to the future. Well, at some point you've got to deal with those future costs.
But when you have cities like Flint, right, essentially sitting over a balance sheet, making a choice about how to keep clean water flowing into people's homes. When you have cities like Detroit, you know, going through bankruptcy, you have cities all over the state really struggling with providing just basic services to people. Isn't it time to rethink the strategy? I mean,
you've got to rethink everything. But in these communities, in most of these communities, if you look at their retiree rolls, they have 2 to 3 times more people collecting retirement benefits and retiree health care than they do working, providing services to the community, which means the taxpayers are supporting workforce 2 to 3 times you know what's required to deliver services. And we've got to figure out still, and we're nowhere near doing it, how we address those huge legacy costs, and how we start perhaps extending retirement ages. A lot of these communities, you can still retire 25, 30 years and go on the taxpayers' dole for another 25, 30 years or longer.
What do you think? What do you think the ultimate verdict will be on Rick Snyder? I mean, in terms of popularity, like 2 years, he's got 2 more years as governor. He's struggled with popularity even when he's been successful in the places where he has been successful. Does he sort of reconcile those two things in the last year?
I mean, if you look at Michigan, this is not a place that has treated its former governors as heroes beyond Bill Milliken, the only one, and he had a similar problem while he was in office with this PCB incident, and he was able to recover for it. But people don't sit around saying loving things about John Engler or Jim Blanchard or Jennifer Granholm. So Michigan's a tough place. It's hard on its governors.
Okay, finally tonight, a new report on economic disparities in bordering school districts shows that the nation's worst economic divide is between Grosse Pointe and Detroit. The study from the New Jersey nonprofit EdBuild refers to America's most segregated school district borders. It says nearly half of the students in Detroit public schools live in poverty, but only 6.5% of households in neighboring Grosse Pointe public schools are poor. This is a longstanding issue here in Southeast Michigan. It's not just Detroit and Grosse Pointe. You can probably do similar comparisons all over the place. I always say that the solution to this, I think, is more regional school districts, right? Maryland, where I lived for 15 years, has 13 school districts statewide for 3 million people. One district goes from the harbor in Baltimore all the way up to the Pennsylvania border almost. Creating more common interest among communities is part of, I guess, equalizing educational opportunity, isn't it?
Or you can make Detroit richer, which I think is
that's a great strategy too. How we do that?
A better solution. I mean, one of the reasons you have this great disparity is because the middle class left Detroit in such large numbers. First the white middle class, then the black middle class, and so you don't truly have a significant wealthy class in Detroit as you do in some other major cities. So you left the city basically lower middle class, working poor people, and what's the reason? I mean, why do people leave? One of the main reasons they leave is because of the schools. So you have this vicious circle here where, you have the education disparities, largely because people left to get a better education. I'm not sure how regional districts would work if you're asking the suburbs to combine with what stands as today as a truly dysfunctional school district. I think you have to greatly improve the Detroit schools before you can get to that place.
But I always think that the argument here is you pay now or you pay later, right? You pay to support decent public education in the city of Detroit, or you pay to build prisons and keep people in cells at $33,000 a year.
We've been paying. The structure just defies any efforts to flood money in, any efforts to flood reforms in. Now, if you're saying, let's dissolve the Detroit School District and give chunks to all the neighboring districts, you might have some success with that.
You have a sovereignty issue there. Why should the people in Detroit not have control over their schools?
You're talking about regional districts, and they would have their same. They would have some control. I mean, they wouldn't be voiceless in these new districts. But if you're saying to parents in Grosse Pointe or parents in Dearborn or whatever, we're going to put you in the Detroit schools, all they're going to do is pack up and run like they did in the 70s when that idea was proposed.
Yeah. So, but then what's the solution? I mean, you say make Detroit richer. How do you do that?
You got to restore Detroit's middle class, which starts with rebuilding these neighborhoods. I think the crime problem, we know how to do that. It's resources, it's manpower. The reforming the schools that's just defied us. And I'm not sure this latest iteration of school reform in Detroit is going to work any better.
It's not. It's not an earnest effort either.
I don't think you can. Well, I mean, it was
it's a
$750 million is pretty earnest. I don't think you can just continue to take this broken structure and say we're going to try and patch it up. And we need a big idea. We need a much bigger idea than we've seen.
Yeah. Before we go, I want to mention a Detroit News article today that really caught my attention. I know caught yours too, about dirty and missing instruments in surgeries and things at the Detroit Medical Center. Boy, you read that and it's harrowing.
Chilling.
It makes you not want to go to the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, and it's at all of their hospitals. These are supposed to be some of the premier hospitals in the region. Best doctors, best facilities. You got Children's Hospital was experiencing these same problems. And when you think about causes of death and causes of subsequent problems, a lot of it has to do with infections in hospitals. And hospitals have been attacking this aggressively to cut their costs. And now you have here a hospital that can't seem to clean its instruments. They've got struggles with their union. It's a really poisonous union environment, apparently. But in the end, a doctor is picking up a piece of equipment that's got old blood on it.
Yeah.
It's like third world stuff.
And the response here, I thought, was a little less apoplectic than it should have been. I mean, you hear about this, you would think if you were running these hospitals, you'd say, wait a second, this is a terrible thing. They don't seem to be in that space.
Conrad Mallett, we quoted him saying, he's the CEO of the hospital system. Conrad Mallett, we quoted him as saying, we're not negligent, we're concerned. And I'm like, no, this has been going on for 10 years, you're negligent. Yeah. If this goes on a month and you haven't solved it, you're negligent. But to allow these complaints to build over a decade.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The thing that you always worry about is that if you go to the hospital, you'll get sicker, right?
That's my theory. Doctor will kill you quicker than anyone.
I have this argument with my sister all the time. She's a physician. That going to the hospital, going to the doctor, puts you in contact with sick people and sick things, and this story just absolutely reinforces.
I mean, I bring my own pen to sign in at the doctor's office.
Because you don't want to touch anything.
I'm paranoid about that stuff, and you wonder if this is happening at DMC, where else is it happening?
Where else is it happening?
And I really think attacking the cleanliness, the sterility of the instruments is
it's like a basic thing,
one.
Right? That
First
should be
step.
what you're doing before anything else. All right, that's going to do it for My Week. Thanks for spending time with us. Check out myweek.org and Twitter and Facebook for more on the show. Christy will be back next week, and we'll see you then.